It is the Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network, caught up on news, weather, traffic, and sports. And our next guest is here. A lot of people have this question. They go on a job interview, they think they did well, and then they don't get the job. And they're like, why? Why didn't they? I thought I did terrific. Well, we have a guest with us today who's going to help us with this. Mike Gellman is a career coach, speaker, and the author of Pipe Dreams, 7 Pipelines of Career Success. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Sure. What's the number one misleading thing that happens in an interview where the candidate does think they have a chance and they have no clue that they have no chance?
So there's a lot of variables there. Oftentimes, we might have a blind spot, where we think it went well and it was congenial. But on the other side, they didn't feel that it was the right fit in terms of our skill set, or in terms of connecting the dots. So it's really around, in some cases, just the qualifications. Didn't come across clearly to the employer, how we can help them, whether it's today or many times they're hiring for the future, what the position is going to grow into.
Right. Well, for example, there was an article a couple of days ago out of Silicon Valley, why you have to not hire the right person for the good of the company. And I was like, wow, that's, that's pretty bad if that's true. I guess it must be because somebody's writing it. What kinds of intangibles go on in an interview if the qualifications are a match? In other words, a job description, you've got what the job description has. And again, you feel it went pleasantly. You didn't get any cues. In a situation like that, is it possible the interviewee wasn't paying enough attention to the interviewer, and there were tells, like in a poker game, eye rolls, moves, ticks kind of things, which you should read and say, oh, my God, this guy's uncomfortable or gal, no matter what they're saying to me. I know something's wrong. Or is a good interviewer, trained to not let the truth out until the rejection letter comes?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ed. It brings up a number of things, and the main thing being around the connection you're making and the cultural fit. And so let's assume it's someone that's a good interviewer, kind of as you were saying, they're a good interviewer. Well, many job seekers that I've worked with, maybe they've been out of work. Let's take a situation where they've been out of work for 6 months or a year. And at this point, I don't know about you, but if I've been out of work for that long, it might start to get to me. It might start to affect my attitude a little bit. I might be depressed. I might be a little bitter or angry or whatever. And so many times we're unaware of how we show up during the interview. So you might have all the skills that match the job description, but I have to say, in even interviews that I've done, is sometimes the person's presence just exudes this negative energy. And it's an intangible that an interviewer is not going to necessarily tell you that. And they may see that you have the skills, but they're picking up this negative energy. And you might not even be aware of it. And so sometimes it's explicit and it comes out in how you answer some of your answers to questions. For example, you never want to badmouth your former employer or boss. And some people aren't very skilled at, kind of sharing a challenge that they had without trashing them. So that's certainly a flag.
Sure.
Other times, they're not answering the question directly and succinctly. They're going on and on and on, but not getting to the point quick enough and not, answering the real question being asked. So those are some things. And then the cultural fit.
Let me just drill down on that one for a second, because I get that on the air a lot. I get tons of guests. We just had one a couple hours ago where there's no answer in sight, and you feel like you're being distracted from what you wanted to know. And the rule that I always thought you should use, if it requires explanation, right, don't you want to put the answer up front so the interviewer knows why they're listening for the explanation, instead of holding it back? Like, if you want to know how I feel about this, you're going to have to let me go on and on for about 4 paragraphs. And at the end, then I'll let you know what you want. Is there any help to just saying straight up yes or no, and here's why? Does that help?
It absolutely does. That and knowing how to tell a good story with structure, without going on and on. So yeah, so absolutely, you can say, if they're asking you, hey, tell us about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker or something, or a difference of opinion.
There you go.
That's a common question.
Sure.
So some people will launch into a long story, which they're like, where is this going? So the key thing is to say, you know what? I can think of a few instances where I had a conflict with a coworker. Let me think for a minute. Okay, here's one. So that clues them in that you're about to tell them a story about a specific example of when you did that. So yes, to your point, to start off with that, and then they can always ask you for more details. They can always ask you for more details. And so what I advise many of my clients is kind of a framework of start off with, what was the challenge that you had?
Right.
What actions did you take in response to that challenge? What was the outcome, and what was the benefit?
Absolutely, right? Because you want to, I think the key word there is just be responsive, right? The main thing is to try to feel what the emphasis is of the questioner and match it. You know, if they're really concerned about something, speak directly to it. You know, interviewing is not what it used to be, right? 30, 40 years ago, an interview was usually they were interested in you, and that's how you got the appointment. And what they're really doing is seeing now in person, do you fit what they already like about you? Sometimes people will tell us, especially when we do topics like this or when we do open phones on this, they'll say, I could tell from the minute I got there that there was no real interest going on. I felt like this was one of those pro forma interviews, so they can go down the hall and say, yes, I did look at 3 other people, but I want the guy I mentioned yesterday. But to satisfy the higher up who didn't want me to pick the first. Right. Is there a way to sense that you're in one of those interviews and maybe do something of value that would, reconnect on a genuine basis if you feel like you're just getting the, all right, great. Well, thanks for coming by. And you're like, wait a second. Nothing I said seemed to be reacted to there. Can you fix that in the moment, or do you just have to, cut your losses and move on?
Occasionally, there may be a way to fix that in the moment. So number one, yes, that does happen. Companies, unfortunately, will go through the motions, even when they might have someone in mind internally, or if you're internal and you're applying for jobs. One of the things you can do is really probe. So usually in most interviews, they'll give you an opportunity to ask them questions, whether in the middle or mostly at the end.
Right.
That's an opportunity to probe, like, what is it they're hiring? They're looking for someone because they're trying to solve a problem. So what's made it so difficult for them? What's the biggest frustration, biggest pain point? If you can get at that pain point that they're experiencing right now, that can give you an in. And many times that can give you an edge over somebody that they had in mind. I've seen this happen many times. Someone that they had in mind that basically it was their job to lose, but an external candidate came in who really wanted the job. They asked a lot of questions. They came prepared and did their homework, and they outshine, the chosen one, if you will.
Right.
And so there are things you can do in the moment.
Now, that's traditional advice, but I think it'd be good for us to reinforce it right now. In a moment, we'll talk about the social media dangers, but just on this idea of doing homework, right? A lot of times, people will use an industry listing of jobs, or it'll be a LinkedIn thing, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities there that you may want to go after. How much time do you need at a minimum to do the kind of substantive homework that would make a difference in the interview? Is this a half an hour assignment, 3-hour assignment? What would you say to people? You say, okay, you know what? I've got 12 targets in the marketplace Sunday night, looking out to Monday and how I'm going to do my week. How much time would you tell them to spend on, granted they have Google, right? Or they have some kind of search engine. So it shouldn't be going to the library, but it should be more than just cursory. You don't want to just have a cursory understanding. Give us a feel for the kind of interview research that can make a difference.
Yeah, well, in this day and age, the Internet's really helped facilitate the research. So, and I would say, minimum an hour on the web, researching the company's website, looking at press releases, listening to, many times they'll have investor calls on their website under their investor relations, and get a lot of insight into the strategic direction of the company, which will enable you to ask more intelligent questions. So that's pretty easy to do. The other thing, though, is really the interview starts way before a job's, advertised, and that is to leverage your network. It's to get a hold of people that work for that company. It doesn't matter if they're in the same department or not, but just to start talking to people who work within that company to get a sense of, well, what's the culture like there? What's prized? What do they really value there? And what are some tips? So that's part of the research too, is talking to people, and that takes a little bit more time. If you have some people that you already know that work there, then ask if you can talk to them for 30 minutes. So maybe a few of those discussions will give you a leg up on the company, and that's how I got one of my jobs many years ago, by talking to someone who worked in the company who clued me in and saying, no, this is a big issue for them right now. And that helped me to tailor my presentation, because that was part of the process, and I nailed it.
There you go.
But I wouldn't have nailed it if I didn't take the time to have those conversations.
To have that conversation. So research isn't just clicking and reading. Research is what you're describing there. A good, substantive conversation can give you the things that are not going to show up on the printed page, maybe in summaries and descriptions.
Yeah, you want the insider's view. So
Exactly.
Whatever you can do to network your way in and talk to others in the organization will give you a big leg up, and be prepared. And insight into what we were talking about earlier, it's just a formality, and they're not going to really hire me or anyone else.
Exactly.
They already have someone in mind. That's where you can get that intelligence.
Right.
And
there you
that'll
go.
save you time.
Sure.
And grief.
Right, indeed. If you're just joining us, Mike Gellman is on the line. You can follow along at MikeGellman.com, career coach, and we're talking about people who think that they're going to get the job after the interview, and it turns out that they do not. All right, so now we're going to go into this very dicey area of the social media, all right? Mm-hmm. And one might think, and maybe you can help us break this down, one might think the best advice is wipe out every tweet before you go. Don't gamble that leaving anything there, unless it's a bunch of stuff like, I love this company, I've always loved them, boy, my dream would be to work for that company. I mean, that kind of stuff I'm sure can't get you in trouble. But Twitter especially has a lot of viscerality to it. It's got a lot of, instantaneous, emotional stuff in there. Is Twitter a good thing to not just look at it, but scrub it to make sure there's no problems?
Well, yeah, you can do what you can, but unfortunately, as you know, with social media, and how viral it is, you can delete things at your end, but it's already, the train's already left the station. It's already in other people's feeds and other people, so I think you need to be proactive. And, if you're like an alien from outer space, looking at someone's Twitter feed or Facebook, posts and things like that, what's the message you're getting? And because employers, as you're alluding to, employers check this out. 90% of employers will check. They do a search for your Facebook and Twitter and all that.
Right.
So the key thing is be very mindful of what you're putting out there, because we self-sabotage all the time. You heard about the recent Equifax data breach, right?
Sure.
143 million people affected.
Right.
And, you feel exposed, but we voluntarily expose ourselves to risks when we're in the job market by posting stuff, pictures of us partying the night before, or making a political commentary that's either one extreme or the other, and you never know who you're going to offend with that. And so, clean up what you can,
right.
But you got to be
right.
you got to be proactive and not even put that stuff out there to begin with. Make sure it's a inner circle.
That's a tough world, right? Where you got to make sure everything you do doesn't potentially offend someone. That's tough, right? Not easy.
That is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, the book is called Pipe Dreams, 7 Pipelines of Career Success. What do you mean by a pipeline?
So it has a few meanings. In this book, I actually make an analogy to the natural gas system. I worked for a natural gas company, and so I use that as a metaphor throughout the book in terms of how it applies to your career. So that's one level. Like if you have a leaky pipe, what kind of leaks do you have in your career? Things that you need to patch up, for example.
Right.
But there's also the other aspect of it is when you are searching for a job, you need a full pipeline, in terms of your networking. You need to kind of be visible out there, and that's a big part of your pipeline, is to keep those opportunities available and continually being out there.
I'm wondering, as I'm thinking about this now, is business doing a great disservice looking for these perfect automatons? Aren't they losing tons of talent that come with temperament and come with, opinions that they don't like? It seems to me to be counter the idea of I want the best talent, or do I want the best behaved applicant? What do you make of that?
The strongest teams and organizations are diverse. And so companies do themselves a disservice, in my opinion, when they hire automatons, as you call it. So, and it's expensive to hire the wrong person. And so I think that's more incumbent upon employers to be looking at that diversity of the pool, because many hiring managers, quite frankly, we hire people who are like us. You want to hire people that you trust and that think like us, but that's not necessarily what the company needs or what the team needs. And so as an applicant or a candidate, one of the things that you can do is really be clear on what their problems are that they're trying to solve, and how your different experience or different perspective can enrich that. That's really your goal as the candidate, is to connect the dots to them, because they're not necessarily always thinking that way. They're thinking, I need somebody that's got 10 years experience in the healthcare industry. And maybe you've never worked in healthcare. So what value could you provide as an outsider to the healthcare industry? What value could you provide to them? And you need to connect the dots as the candidate to kind of give them that light bulb moment, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That actually would be really good. So
that's awesome, right?
It's a challenge.
Yeah, but that is that's a big moment when somebody says, wow, I haven't even thought of that. Boy, then now you've got somebody's attention when that happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. All right, I'm on your website, and I'm on the page about the coaching process. In step 1, complete a brief career discovery session questionnaire. How difficult is it for people to be perfectly candid in doing, and objective, doing a self-inventory on this? And is it good to have a girlfriend, wife, best friend, drinking buddy weigh in and go, oh, dude, this sounds great, but this isn't you? Which you come up, yeah, this is awesome, but who's this for? This doesn't sound like the guy I've known for 20 years since college, or vice versa. You know, your partner at home says, oh, this is terrific. Who did you write this for? So how important is it to really hold yourself to objectivity? And that's easy to say, maybe more difficult to do.
Yeah, many of us are a legend in our own mind, right? We might think we're great.
Right.
Or vice versa. We might think we're awful. We discount ourselves, our strengths. And so getting that other perspectives is really powerful. And one of the things I use with many of my leadership coaching clients is 360-degree feedback. And what that is getting feedback from coworkers, from people that report to you, either directly or indirectly, from your boss, and it's all anonymous feedback, from clients or customers you've supported, and you can include friends in there as well. And that's where you can get some really rich feedback on how you're perceived and what your perceived strengths are and weaknesses. So, yeah, that's really important that you have that, because otherwise you're going to either show up to these interviews not knowing. Maybe you've got some nervous habits that really turn off the interviewer, that are distracting. You mentioned distractions earlier. That's a huge thing, whether it's what you're doing with your hands during the interview, tapping your feet, whether it's, we even had a candidate once where her body odor was so overwhelming, my boss almost fainted.
Right.
So
and the thing with that is we had
a distraction, and she interviewed well.
Oh, I get it.
A great candidate, but it was such a distraction that she just didn't stand a chance, unfortunately.
Well, we had that situation many years ago with a receptionist at one of our stations, and it took a half a day in the conference room for somebody to actually volunteer to say something because of how sensitive some of these subjects can be.
Yeah.
Right. So an interviewee must know something like that. If you don't pick up on it, you really can't expect anyone else to tap you on the shoulder, and say it's a problem until after it's entered into whatever you're trying to do, whether it's a job interview or a job conference. You know what I mean? That's something that's really 100% on them, right? They have to know that.
Yeah, and so one of the things you can do, aside from asking your friends and family, and sometimes they'll tell you and sometimes they won't, right? Because they don't want to hurt your feelings. You can always go back. I recommend this. Always go back to employers that you've interviewed with and ask them for some feedback about the interview. So maybe they've said, we've moved on, Ed, we went with someone that was a better fit. You interviewed well, but we went with someone else. You can come back to them and ask them for feedback just for your own development. You're not trying to contradict or, influence them to decide otherwise. You're just for your own development and to better position you for the future, whether it's with them or with other companies. And many companies, many individuals will take the time, and many recruiters don't have the time to do that. But you can always ask, and you might get some really valuable feedback about how you came across in the interview that will help you next time, and it will shorten your search.
During the interview, beyond the words, and again, those are great examples. Watch out for your tics and your tapping and getting too comfortable around. What would you direct their eyes to do with the interviewer? Should we be aware that we could be getting signals? Should we be looking for them? Or is that going to detract from the value of our presentation? And hey, you know what? You're there. Just go all in. And if there's negativity that's not obvious to you, don't waste time looking for it. Take your best shot. Everything in life is a gamble. Wait for the outcome. Or in the middle of it, boy, watch the blinking, watch their tics, picking up pencils, touching things, putting feet up on the desk, standing and walking while you're talking, all this kind of thing. Would you advise people to pay careful attention to that?
Yes, and I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. So yes, you do want to be paying attention to that because you can adapt how you respond based on that. That's feedback. That's data that you can respond to. So it's something that falls in the realm of emotional intelligence. So are you able to pick up the clues in that environment that are going on? So if you see that maybe the interviewer starts tapping their pencil, that could be a sign that you're droning on a little long. So you want to be able to pick that up. Or how well, if it's a panel interview, you have 3 or 4 people interviewing you.
Right.
How do they relate to each other? Are they laughing with each other? Are they more formal? Because that's going to inform you. Like maybe you can loosen up a bit and laugh along with them and lightly joke along with them. You have to read the room. But if they're really formal and you're this gregarious guy or gal and you're just over the top, that's a misread. You really want to read the room there and
you want to right. You want to match up to the vibe in that room, right? You don't want to be the outlier, right? So
right.
When you're coaching people, how difficult is it if you're not there, but they come back and say, look, I need some coaching. I just went through 3 or 4 interviews over the past couple of weeks. I have no idea why I didn't get it. Thought it was a good match. Is that a tough discovery for you, or are people pretty forthcoming and you can get to it rather quickly and start to remediate? What's the biggest part of your job when you begin the coaching process?
Yeah, I just had a new client earlier today with that type of discussion, and it's kind of, I have to be detective in a way. It's really a facilitative process to say, what are the patterns? What are the patterns that are emerging? So is it that are they getting a lot of interviews, but they're not getting offers? Or is it the fact that they're not getting many interviews at all? So I have to find out a little bit kind of at what stage in this process is there a breakdown. So that's part of it. But the second aspect of it is really just to get a sense of how they might be coming across to me, and I'll share them feedback with them. I'll share feedback with them about how I'm experiencing them. So it's not a one-shot deal, Ed. It's usually over a series of coaching conversations that we're able to really get a kind of peel back the layers of the onion to see what's really going on here. Because all I have is their perspective, and I need to help them facilitate their process of getting additional perspectives so we can find out what kind of fixes, what kind of adjustments can they make to their process.
If they're full-on committed to it, can they, in a couple of weeks of coaching, be a better interviewee if they're really open to being helped?
They can, yes. Not always. It just depends where they're starting from, how skilled they are.
Right.
As an example, it can take as little as one hour session in some cases.
Wow.
For example, I had a recent college grad who had been interviewing for months but not getting any offers. We did a mock interview session, the 1 hour by Skype. I was able to give him some real time feedback, and within 2 weeks he had his first job offer, and within the first month he had 3 offers that were ideal for his degree. And now he's got a career job now with benefits and all that. And this was just for him. I was able to work with him and just give him a framework that he could use to respond, and it worked out.
That is awesome. See, now I think that's very encouraging for people to hear on a Friday, whether they're starting their commute or they're getting ready to clean up their desk. Great news there. Hey, congratulations on the book. It's called Pipe Dreams, 7 Pipelines of Career Success, and the website is MikeGellman.com. Mike, thank you. We're in hiring season now. We're going to be in crunch household season before you know it, with the holidays coming. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and maybe we can pick out some specific examples that you can help us tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fun.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Mike Gellman. The website is MikeGellman.com, and the book is called Pipe Dreams, 7 Pipelines of Career Success. The Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network. Breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and a look ahead at the close on Wall Street are all coming up next.